Lauren Foster had been Anthony Mancini's executive secretary for 18 months. She knew his schedule better than he did. She anticipated his needs before he voiced them. She never asked questions about the men in expensive suits who arrived at odd hours, or the conversations conducted in rapid Italian behind closed doors. She was invisible in the best possible way. Professional, efficient, loyal. At least, that was how things used to be. The office occupied the top 3 floors of a building in Midtown Manhattan. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Glass and steel stretched toward the sky. Anthony's private office sat at the corner, all dark wood and leather, the kind of space that demanded respect before a single word was spoken. Lauren's desk stood just outside, a guardian between Anthony and the rest of the world. She arrived at 7 every morning without fail. Black coffee waiting on his desk by 7:15. Files organized, calls screened, meetings prepared. 18 months of perfect routine. Until 6 months ago, when everything shattered. Lauren had been leaving the building at 11 at night, arms full of documents that needed filing before the morning. She'd hailed a taxi on the corner, slid into the back seat, gave her address in Queens. The driver pulled into traffic. 3 blocks later, a black sedan came out of nowhere. High-speed chase. Rival crew fleeing from one of Anthony's operations gone wrong. The sedan ran a red light at 60 miles per hour and slammed into the passenger side of Lauren's taxi. Metal screamed. Glass exploded. The world spun in a chaos of sound and pain. Lauren woke up in a hospital bed 3 hours later. Shattered kneecap. Torn ligaments. Surgery required immediately. Anthony had been there when she opened her eyes. Still wearing the same shirt from earlier that day. Tie loosened. Hair disheveled. He'd stood by the window, back rigid, hands shoved deep in his pockets. "The surgery is scheduled for 6 a.m., he'd said without turning around. "Best orthopedic surgeon in the state. Everything is handled." Lauren had tried to speak, to say she couldn't afford that, but he'd cut her off with a single raised hand. Non-negotiable. That was the only conversation they'd had about it. The surgery went well. 3 months of recovery followed. Physical therapy, pain management, slow, careful steps learning to walk properly again. Anthony paid every bill without comment. He sent flowers once, a massive arrangement that filled her small apartment. No card. When Lauren returned to work, he'd simply nodded and said, "Welcome back." Nothing else. No questions about her recovery, no discussion of the accident, no acknowledgement of the guilt that clearly weighed on him. But Lauren saw it anyway, in the way his jaw tightened when she limped past his office, and how he'd reassigned her parking spot to the closest space in the garage, in the increased security presence that followed her home each night. Anthony Mancini didn't apologize with words. He apologized with actions. For 3 months after her return, things went back to normal. Or as normal as they could be. Lauren still limped slightly, especially at the end of long days. Her knee ached when rain was coming. But she managed. Then, 4 weeks ago, her physical therapist recommended she start strength training to fully rehabilitate the joint. Lauren found a gym 3 blocks from the office. Elevate Fitness. Clean, professional. Not too crowded during early morning hours. She signed up for sessions with a personal trainer, a former Marine named Ryan Blake, who specialized in injury recovery. The first session had been brutal. Lauren's knee had trembled, threatened to give out, pain shooting through the joint with every movement. But Ryan had been patient, encouraging, adjusting exercises to her limitations. "You're stronger than you think," he'd said, spotting her through a modified squat. "Your body remembers how to do this. We just have to remind it." By the second week, Lauren was hooked. Not on Ryan specifically, though he was good at his job. She was hooked on the feeling of getting stronger, of her body slowly remembering what it felt like to move without pain, without fear. Tuesday and Thursday mornings became gym mornings, which meant arriving at the office at 7:30 instead of 7. Anthony noticed immediately. The first Tuesday, he'd glanced at the clock when she walked in, then at her face, then back to his computer without comment. But Lauren felt the weight of that look. The second week, he'd been standing by her desk when she arrived, coffee cup in hand. "Traffic?" he'd asked. "Gym," Lauren had replied, setting down her bag. Physical therapy recommended strength training for my knee. He'd nodded once. Good. That should have been the end of it. But Anthony kept noticing things. Lauren started wearing her hair down more often. It was practical, really. The gym's locker room had terrible hair dryers, and her hair air-dried better when loose. But Anthony noticed. She caught him looking 3 separate times, his dark eyes tracking the way her hair fell across her shoulders, before he jerked his attention back to whatever document he'd been reading. She also started carrying a bright pink gym bag, a gift from her best friend Sarah, who insisted that Lauren needed more color in her life. The bag clashed terribly with Lauren's usual neutral work aesthetic of grays and beiges and blacks, but it made her smile every time she saw it. Anthony noticed that too. New bag, he'd commented one Thursday morning. Gift from a friend, Lauren had replied. Pink. He'd said it like he was trying to figure out what the color meant. It's cheerful. Something had flickered across his face, too quick to identify. It is. But the thing Anthony noticed most was how Lauren smiled at her phone. 3 weeks into training, Ryan started texting her motivational messages and reminders to stretch between sessions. Helpful. Professional. But the messages made Lauren smile. Small, genuine expressions of amusement or encouragement that lit up her face. Anthony saw every single one. He was in a meeting with 3 of his captains when Lauren's phone buzzed on her desk outside. Through the glass wall, he watched her pick it up, read the message, and smile. Soft, warm, directed at a screen. He lost track of the conversation entirely. Boss? Luca Ferraro, his second-in-command, had to repeat the question twice before Anthony refocused. By the 4th week, Anthony was actively listening for mentions of the gym, of the trainer, Ryan. The name appeared in conversation 5 times in 3 days. Ryan says I should ice my knee after long periods of sitting. Ryan recommended this protein shake for muscle recovery. Ryan thinks I'll be able to run again in 2 months if I keep up this progress. Ryan. 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 Each mention felt like a small blade between Anthony's ribs. Thursday afternoon, Lauren stopped by his office to drop off signed contracts. She moved with more confidence now. The limp almost entirely gone. Her posture had straightened. She looked healthier, stronger, happy. Ryan helped me do a full squat today, she said, genuine pride in her voice. First time since the accident. Complete range of motion, no pain. Anthony looked up from his desk. That's good progress. It's amazing progress. Her smile was brilliant. He's really good at what he does. Something hot and ugly twisted in Anthony's chest. He recognized it immediately, hated it instantly. Jealousy. I'm glad you're recovering well, he managed. Lauren nodded and left, completely unaware of the war happening inside him. Anthony sat alone in his office for 20 minutes, staring at nothing, trying to rationalize away the feeling. She was his secretary. Her personal life was none of his business. If some gym trainer was helping her heal from an injury that happened because she worked for him, that was good. That was what Anthony wanted. Except it wasn't. He didn't want some stranger making her smile like that. Didn't want someone else seeing her proud and happy and strong. He wanted to be the one who gave her that. Which was completely inappropriate, unprofessional, and dangerous. Anthony poured himself 2 fingers of scotch from the bar in his office and forced himself to let it go. Lauren was off limits. She worked for him. She trusted him. He would not cross that line just because he couldn't control his own emotions. Decision made. Problem solved. Thursday evening changed everything. Anthony was reviewing quarterly reports when he heard Lauren's heels clicking across the marble floor outside his office. He glanced at the clock. 9:15. Late, but not unusual. They both often worked past regular hours. What was unusual was when the clicking stopped at her desk for several minutes, then started again, heading toward the elevator. Anthony stood, moving to his doorway. Lauren was halfway across the reception area, pink gym bag over her shoulder, hair loose around her face. She'd applied lipstick, coral pink, and changed from her usual neutral blouse into something slightly more fitted. Leaving, the question came out sharper than he intended. She turned, slightly startled. Yes, I finished the Morrison contracts. It's late. I have plans. She smiled, that same warm expression he'd seen directed at her phone all week. Anthony's hands curled into fists at his sides. Plans. Ryan offered me an extra training session to make up for the Tuesday I missed because of the board meeting. She adjusted the strap on her shoulder. The gym is open until midnight. Ryan. Of course. 9:30 is late for a training session. He couldn't keep the edge from his voice. Lauren's brow furrowed slightly. Is something wrong, Mr. Mancini? Everything was wrong, but Anthony couldn't say that. No. Be safe. She nodded, smile returning. I will. Have a good night. The elevator doors closed behind her. Anthony stood in the empty reception area, jaw clenched, jealousy burning through his carefully maintained control. He lasted 15 minutes. Then he was grabbing his coat, taking the stairs down to the parking garage, sliding behind the wheel of his black Audi. He told himself he was just making sure she got to the gym safely. That this was about security. About protecting an employee who'd already been hurt once because of his world. He told himself a lot of lies as he followed her taxi through Manhattan streets. Inside the cab, Lauren pulled out her phone and dialed. Hey, it's me, she said when someone answered. I'm going to be late tonight. Ryan scheduled an extra session. I know, but my knee feels so good, Sarah. I can actually move again without pain. Sarah. Anthony filed the name away, realizing with a strange twist in his gut that he knew almost nothing about Lauren's personal life. 18 months working together, and he couldn't name a single friend. Couldn't recall her mentioning family. Didn't know what she did on weekends. He'd kept her at a professional distance so effectively that she'd become nearly invisible to him. Until suddenly, she wasn't. The taxi pulled up in front of Elevate Fitness. Lauren paid, stepped out onto the sidewalk, gym bag bright pink against the evening darkness. Anthony parked across the street, engine still running, watching her walk through the glass doors. This was insane. He should leave. Should go back to the office, pour another scotch, forget this entire evening. Instead, he turned off the engine and settled in to watch. Through the windshield, he watched Lauren disappear inside Elevate Fitness. The building was all glass and chrome, deliberately transparent to show off the expensive equipment inside. He could see clearly from his position across the street. She appeared again on the main floor, moving past rows of treadmills toward the weight section in the back. Her pink gym bag stood out like a beacon against the neutral grays and blacks of the space. Then Ryan emerged from somewhere in the rear of the facility. He was tall, probably 6'2", with the kind of build that came from years of disciplined training rather than vanity. Blonde hair pulled back in a small knot at the base of his skull. Tattoos covered both forearms. Military-style ink that suggested stories Anthony couldn't read from this distance. Ryan smiled when he saw Lauren. Broad, easy, the kind of smile that came naturally. Lauren smiled back. They met near the squat rack, and even from across the street, Anthony could see how comfortable they were together. No awkwardness, no hesitation. Just two people who'd spent enough time in each other's company to develop genuine rapport. Ryan said something. Lauren laughed. The sound inaudible through the glass but visible in the way her shoulders shook slightly. How her hand came up to cover her mouth. Anthony's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. They started setting up equipment. Ryan grabbed weights from a rack, placed them strategically. Lauren dropped her bag on a nearby bench and began stretching, rolling her shoulders, bending to touch her toes. She was wearing black leggings and a fitted tank top in deep purple. Anthony had never seen her in anything like it. At work, she wore conservative blouses and dress pants, everything designed to blend into the background. This was different. This was Lauren as herself, not as his secretary. Ryan demonstrated an exercise, some kind of lunge with rotation. Lauren watched carefully, nodded, then attempted to mirror his movements. Her form was slightly off. Ryan stepped closer, hands moving to her waist to adjust her position. His hands, on her waist. Anthony felt something dark and possessive roar to life in his chest. He forced himself to breathe, to think rationally. Ryan was a trainer. This was his job. Adjusting form, preventing injury. That was what trainers did. It meant nothing. Except Anthony wanted to cross the street, walk into that gym, and remove Ryan's hands from Lauren's body with extreme prejudice. He gripped the steering wheel instead, knuckles white. This was insane. He was acting like a jealous teenager, not the head of one of the most powerful organizations on the East Coast. Lauren was allowed to have a trainer. She was allowed to smile, to laugh, to exist outside of her role in his life. She didn't belong to him. But the rational part of his brain was losing the argument against the part that wanted to claim her anyway. For 20 minutes, Anthony sat in the car watching them work through exercises. Ryan was professional, keeping appropriate distance most of the time, but occasionally he'd step close to spot her, to adjust her grip on weights, to correct her posture. Each touch made Anthony's vision narrow. He needed to leave. This was crossing every line of appropriate behavior. He was her employer, not her keeper. What she did on her own time was none of his business. Anthony reached for the ignition key. Then Ryan stepped back from Lauren, said something that made her nod, and headed toward a door at the side of the building. Anthony watched him push through into what looked like an alley, watched him pull a pack of cigarettes from his pocket, shake one loose, light it with a silver lighter. Ryan leaned against the brick wall, took a long drag, exhaled smoke into the night air. Just a smoke break. Normal. Anthony was definitely leaving now. This entire surveillance operation was ridiculous and beneath him. His hand was actually on the key when headlights cut through the darkness. A gray Mercedes sedan pulled up to the curb near where Ryan stood. Sleek, expensive, the kind of car that cost more than most people made in a year. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. Anthony's entire body went cold. He knew that face, had memorized it years ago, along with every other face that belonged to his enemies. Viktor Sokolov, 6'1", always impeccably dressed, never without a weapon. He'd worked his way up through the Bratva's ranks with ruthless efficiency, earned his position as Alexei Volkov's right hand through a combination of intelligence and brutality, and he was standing in an alley with Lauren's personal trainer. Viktor moved with the casual confidence of someone who owned whatever space he occupied. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. Thick, white, clearly stuffed with something. Ryan straightened from the wall but didn't approach. Cautious. Smart. They spoke. Anthony couldn't hear the words, but he could read body language. This wasn't a friendly conversation. This was business. Viktor extended the envelope. Ryan hesitated for 3 seconds, then took it. He opened it immediately, fingers flipping through what Anthony could now clearly see was cash. Counting, verifying. The movements were quick, practiced. 90 seconds of conversation followed. Viktor did most of the talking, hands punctuating his words with small, precise gestures. Ryan nodded several times, asked what looked like 2 questions, received answers. Then Viktor turned and walked back to his Mercedes without shaking hands, without any of the usual pleasantries that ended legitimate business transactions. The car pulled away from the curb and disappeared into traffic. Ryan stood alone in the alley, envelope still in his hand. He looked down at it for a long moment, expression unreadable. Then he folded it in half, shoved it into his back pocket, took one last drag of his cigarette, and crushed it under his heel. Casual. Like he'd just finished a smoke break. Like he hadn't just taken money from the Bratva. Ryan walked back inside the gym, pushing through the door without a backward glance. Anthony sat frozen in the driver's seat, jealousy completely incinerated by the cold fury of threat assessment. This wasn't about feelings anymore. This wasn't about watching Lauren smile at another man. About irrational possessiveness. About wanting what he shouldn't have. This was about security. About danger. About his secretary potentially being used as an access point to his organization. He pulled his phone from his coat pocket and dialed Luca's number. 2 rings. Boss. Luca's voice was alert, despite the late hour. He never slept deeply. A habit from 20 years in this life. I need a complete background check. Highest priority. On who? Ryan Blake. Personal trainer at Elevate Fitness on Madison and 43rd. I need everything. Military service records, financial history, known associates, arrests, parking tickets, everything that exists on this man. Luca paused. This related to the secretary? Anthony's jaw tightened. Yes. How urgent? I need it in 3 hours. Another pause. That's a tight timeline. I just watched him take money from Viktor Sokolov in an alley behind the gym where Lauren trains. Anthony's voice was ice. So, yes, it's urgent. Viktor? All traces of sleep vanished from Luca's voice. You're sure? I'm sure. Which means Lauren is either being used or is in danger. I need to know which. I'll pull everyone available. You'll have it by 1 a.m. Good. Anthony ended the call. Through the gym windows, he could see Lauren back at the squat rack, Ryan spotting her through the movement. She looked happy, focused, completely unaware that her trainer had just accepted payment from one of the most dangerous organizations on the East Coast. Completely unaware that she might be a target, Anthony forced himself to think clearly. There were 3 possibilities here. 1. Lauren knew about Ryan's connection to the Bratva and was working with them. Implausible. 18 months of impeccable service, access to sensitive information she'd never leaked, loyalty that had been tested multiple times. If she'd wanted to betray him, she'd had countless better opportunities. 2. Ryan was using Lauren to get close to Anthony's organization without her knowledge. More likely, she was the perfect target. Direct access to Anthony's schedule, his meetings, his movements. And she'd never suspect her helpful, friendly trainer of having ulterior motives. 3. This was a coincidence, and Ryan's business with Viktor had nothing to do with Lauren. Anthony didn't believe in coincidences. He watched them for another 40 minutes. The training session wrapped up. Ryan said something that made Lauren laugh one more time. She grabbed her pink bag, waved goodbye, and headed for the exit. Anthony started his car, prepared to follow her taxi home to make sure she arrived safely. But his mind was already 3 steps ahead, analyzing angles, calculating risks, planning responses. By the time Lauren's taxi turned the corner toward Queens, Anthony had made 2 decisions. First, he would not tell Lauren about this yet. Not until he had solid information. No point in alarming her if Ryan's connection to Viktor was unrelated to her. Second, if Ryan was using Lauren to get to him, Anthony would eliminate the threat before it had a chance to materialize. He'd lost people before because he'd been too slow, too trusting, too willing to believe in good intentions. He would not lose Lauren. His phone buzzed at 12:45 a.m., a text from Luca. Preliminary findings are interesting. Full report in 15 minutes. Anthony pulled over onto a side street and waited. At 1 a.m. exactly, his phone rang. Talk to me, Anthony answered. Ryan Blake, 31 years old, discharged from the Navy 5 years ago. Official reason listed as insubordination, but I pulled the actual file. He questioned orders during a classified operation, refused to follow through on what he considered an illegal command, got him kicked out with a general discharge. So he has principles. Anthony's voice was flat. That doesn't explain Viktor. I'm getting there. After discharge, he bounced around. Security work, private contracting, nothing stable. Started working at Elevate Fitness 9 months ago. Legitimate employment on paper, but his bank records tell a different story. How different? His salary is $3,200 a month, but he's had irregular deposits totaling between $8,000 and $15,000 every month for the past 2 months. Always cash deposits, always under $10,000 to avoid automatic reporting. Anthony's grip on the phone tightened. Sources, unknown. But I cross-referenced his movements with known Bratva activity. 3 documented meetings with Viktor Sokolov in the past 8 weeks. Tonight makes 4. What else? This is where it gets interesting. Luca's voice shifted into the tone he used when he'd found something significant. I pulled the membership records for Elevate Fitness. Ryan has 17 regular clients. 4 of them work as personal assistants or secretaries to major players. 1 works for Jonathan Mercer at Goldman Sachs. 1 for Senator Patricia Morrison. 1 for the DA's office. And now 1 for you. The pattern was unmistakable. He's collecting information. Anthony said it as fact, not question. That's my assessment. Gets close to people who have access. Builds trust through the training relationship. Extracts intelligence without them realizing what's happening. And the Bratva pays him for it. Exactly. Anthony stared through his windshield at the empty street. What's his angle with Lauren specifically? Your schedule, your movements, your routines. She knows when you're vulnerable, where you go, who you meet with. That information is worth a lot to Volkov. Has he approached any of the other clients yet? Asked suspicious questions? I'm running down that angle now. Should have answers by morning. But boss, there's one more thing. What? I checked Ryan's personal life. He has a younger sister, Melissa Blake. 19 years old, student at NYU. Or she was. She stopped going to classes 4 months ago. Hasn't been seen since mid-August. 4 months. Right before Ryan started making regular deposits. You think the Bratva has her? It fits their pattern. Find leverage, apply pressure, get compliance. If they're holding his sister, Ryan doesn't have a choice. He cooperates, or she dies. Anthony processed this new information. It didn't change the fundamental problem. Ryan was feeding information to the Bratva, which meant Lauren was in danger. The reason why Ryan was doing it mattered less than the fact that he was. Keep digging on the sister. I want confirmation. Will do. What's your play with the trainer? Anthony looked at the dashboard clock. 1:16 a.m. I'm going to remove him from the equation before he can do any more damage. You want me to handle it? No. I'll take care of this personally. Boss, if the Bratva is using him, removing him might trigger retaliation, especially if they figure out you know about the connection. Then we'll deal with that when it comes. But I'm not leaving a threat this close to Lauren in play for another day. Luca was quiet for a moment. How much does she know? Nothing. And it's staying that way until I have this handled. Understood. I'll have the full report on your desk by 7 a.m. Anthony ended the call and sat in silence, mind working through scenarios and contingencies. Lauren had no idea she'd been targeted. No idea the man helping her recover from an injury was actually using her as a source of intelligence. No idea that every casual mention of Anthony's schedule, every offhand comment about his meetings, was being reported back to his enemies. She trusted Ryan. The thought made Anthony's hands curl into fists. By dawn, he had a plan. Friday morning arrived with cold autumn sunlight cutting through the Manhattan skyline. Anthony had been in his office since 5 a.m. The full report from Luca spread across his desk like evidence at a crime scene. Ryan Blake's entire life laid bare in 47 pages. Military service, discharge records, financial statements showing deposits that didn't match his declared income. Surveillance photos, documenting 3 previous meetings with Viktor Sokolov, a list of his other clients, each one positioned close to someone powerful, and buried in the appendix, a missing person report filed by Ryan's mother in New Jersey. Melissa Blake, last seen August 14th, 4 months ago. Anthony had read every word twice. Now he sat back in his leather chair, fingers steepled, calculating the best way to eliminate this threat, without tipping off the Bratva that he knew about their intelligence operation. The elevator chimed at 7:28. Lauren's heels clicked across the marble floor of the reception area. Anthony heard her set down her bag, heard the familiar sounds of her morning routine. Computer powering on. Coffee maker starting in the small kitchen alcove. Filing cabinet drawer sliding open. At 7:30 exactly, she appeared in his doorway with his coffee. Black, 2 sugars, the same way he'd taken it for 18 months. Good morning, Mr. Mancini. Her voice was bright, energized. Anthony looked up from the report, really looked at her for the first time since this whole situation had started. Lauren's hair was still damp from a post-workout shower, pulled back in a loose braid that left small tendrils curling around her face. Her cheeks were flushed with exertion and cold air. She wore a charcoal blouse and black dress pants, back to her professional uniform, but something in her posture had changed. She stood straighter, moved with more confidence. The improvement in her physical condition over the past month was undeniable. Ryan had helped her achieve that. Whatever his ulterior motives, he'd genuinely aided her recovery, which made what Anthony was about to do more complicated. Morning. He took the coffee from her. How was your session? Surprise flickered across her face. He rarely asked about her personal activities. Good. Really good, actually. She smiled, and Anthony felt that now familiar twist in his chest. Ryan thinks I'll be ready to try jogging in another 2 weeks. Light jogging, nothing intense, but still. 6 months ago, I couldn't walk without limping. That's excellent progress. Anthony kept his voice neutral, professional. Your dedication to the recovery has been impressive. Thank you. She shifted her weight slightly. Is there anything urgent this morning? I saw the calendar is clear until 10. Nothing urgent. But I'll need you to clear my afternoon. Cancel the meeting with the investors. Her brow furrowed slightly. Professional concern, not personal. Mr. Mancini, that meeting has been scheduled for 3 weeks. They're flying in from Chicago specifically for this. I'm aware. Reschedule it for next week. May I ask why? She pulled out her phone, already pulling up his calendar. If there's an emergency, I should know in case they ask questions. Personal business that requires my immediate attention. Lauren paused, finger hovering over her screen. In 18 months, Anthony had never once prioritized personal business over a major investor meeting. But she was too professional to push. I'll handle it. Thank you, Lauren. She nodded and returned to her desk, already composing the necessary emails. Anthony watched her through the glass wall that separated his office from the reception area. She had no idea. No clue that the man she trusted was feeding information about her employer to an organization that would kill her without hesitation if it served their purposes. No idea that she'd been selected, targeted, manipulated. The thought made rage simmer beneath Anthony's careful control. He waited until Lauren was absorbed in her work, then pulled out his phone and dialed his attorney. David, I need you to handle an acquisition, today. What's the timeline? David Harlow had worked for Anthony for 8 years, knew better than to ask unnecessary questions. Transaction needs to be complete by end of business Tuesday. That's 4 days. What kind of acquisition are we talking about? A gym. Elevate Fitness on Madison. I want to buy the business outright. Assume all assets and liabilities. Take possession immediately. Silence on the other end. Then, carefully. May I ask the reason for the urgency? Security concern. Understood. I'll start the research this morning. Is price a factor? No. Pay whatever it takes to close this quickly and quietly. I don't want the current owner to have time to think or negotiate. Make the offer generous enough that they'd be stupid to refuse. I'll have preliminary numbers by noon. Anthony ended the call and immediately dialed Luca. I need a different kind of search, he said when Luca answered. Female physiotherapist, age 45 or older, at least 15 years of experience, specializes in post-surgical recovery. And Luca, I need someone completely clean. No connections to any organization, no financial irregularities, no history that could be used as leverage. This is for the secretary? Yes. When I remove Ryan, Lauren's recovery doesn't stop. I need someone in place immediately. How fast? I want options by Monday morning. Someone who can start by Wednesday at the latest. I'll make it happen. Luca paused. You're moving fast on this. Every day Ryan has access to Lauren is another day of exposure. I'm not giving the Bratva any more time to extract information. What's your plan for when they notice their asset has been cut off? Let them notice. By the time they realize what happened, the connection will already be severed. They can't leverage what they don't have access to. And if they come at you directly, then we'll handle it the way we always do. Anthony's voice was cold. But they're not getting to Lauren. He spent the rest of Friday morning maintaining normalcy. Calls with his captains, reviewing shipment schedules, handling the daily operations that kept his organization running smoothly. But his mind was on the gym 3 blocks away, on the man who was using his secretary as an intelligence source, on the best way to dismantle this threat without collateral damage. At noon, David called back. I've got the numbers. Elevate Fitness is owned by a holding company, which is owned by a private investor named Marcus Shaw. He's had it for 6 years, runs 4 other gyms in the city. Profitable, but not spectacular. What's the current valuation? Based on revenue and assets, probably around $2.3 million. But for a fast sale with no contingencies, I'd recommend offering 3. Offer 4. Tell him he has until Monday at noon to accept or the offer disappears. $4 million for a gym worth 2? Even David sounded surprised. I want this done, David. Make the offer so attractive he can't say no. I'll draw up the papers this afternoon. The weekend crawled past. Anthony kept tabs on Ryan through Luca's surveillance team. Saturday morning, Ryan met with someone at a coffee shop in Brooklyn. Not Victor this time, but another Bratva associate that Anthony's people had on file. Whatever intelligence operation they were running, it was active and ongoing. Sunday evening, David sent confirmation. Marcus Shaw had accepted the offer. $4 million, cash payment, immediate transfer of ownership. Papers would be finalized Monday morning, possession transferred by Tuesday afternoon. Anthony sat in his penthouse, city lights spreading below him like stars, and felt the first real satisfaction he'd had in days. Monday morning, Lauren arrived at her usual 7:30. She looked tired, moving slower than she had on Friday. "You okay?" Anthony asked when she brought his coffee. "Fine. Just a tough workout this morning. Ryan introduced a new exercise routine and I'm feeling it." Ryan. Still training her? Still building trust? Still mining for information? Not for much longer. At 11 a.m., Luca appeared in Anthony's office with a folder. 3 candidates for physiotherapist, he said, dropping it on the desk. All vetted, all clean, all highly qualified. Anthony flipped through the profiles. The second one caught his attention immediately. Patricia Simmons, 52 years old, 28 years of experience, specialized in orthopedic recovery, currently working at a sports medicine clinic in Connecticut, but willing to relocate for the right opportunity. Married, 3 grown children, no debt, no criminal record, no connections to any organization. Perfect. This one. Offer her whatever salary she wants. I need her available to start Wednesday morning. Where will she be working? We're converting the conference room on the 2nd floor into a therapy space. Get it equipped properly. Full setup, professional-grade equipment, everything she needs. Luca raised an eyebrow. You're bringing the therapy here? Into the building? Closer to my security, less exposure outside. Lauren will be safer. The secretary's going to ask questions. Letter. Anthony closed the folder. What's the status on Ryan? Still following normal patterns. He trained the secretary this morning at 6:30, went home, back to the gym for afternoon clients. Nothing unusual. And Saturday's meeting? We got long-range audio. He was giving information about the Goldman Sachs executive's schedule. Detailed breakdown of where he'll be for the next 2 weeks. Anthony's jaw tightened. How much has he shared about Lauren? We don't know yet, but we have to assume he's been reporting everything. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline autumn sky that made Manhattan look almost beautiful. Anthony was in the office by 6, waiting. At 9 a.m., David called. Papers are signed. You officially own Elevate Fitness as of 30 minutes ago. Keys are being transferred to you this afternoon. Good. I'll be there at 4 to take possession. At 2 p.m., Anthony stood and grabbed his coat. Lauren looked up from her computer. Heading out? Business to handle. I'll be back in a few hours. The Castellano meeting is at 5. Reschedule it. Something flickered across her face. Confusion, maybe concern. 2 rescheduled meetings in 4 days was unusual for him. But she simply nodded. I'll take care of it. Anthony took 2 of his security team, Luca included, and drove to Elevate Fitness. The gym was moderately busy for a Tuesday afternoon. Cardio equipment filled, weight section active, group fitness class happening in the back studio. The manager met him at the front desk. Cynthia Rodriguez, 41, had been managing the gym for 3 years. Mr. Mancini. She extended her hand nervously. Welcome. Mr. Shaw briefed me about the ownership change. Good. I need to speak with you privately. He led her into the back office. Luca taking up position outside the door. Effective immediately, I'm making some staffing changes, Anthony said without preamble. Ryan Blake is terminated. Process his final paycheck. Collect any gym property he has, and make sure he's removed from all systems. He's not to be allowed back in this building. Cynthia blinked. Ryan? But he's one of our best trainers. His clients love him. I'm aware. The decision isn't negotiable. May I ask the reason? If there's been a complaint or... Anthony's expression stopped her mid-sentence. No complaints. But his employment here ends today. Am I clear? She swallowed. Yes, sir. Completely clear. Does he have any sessions scheduled this afternoon? Cynthia checked the computer. 2. One at 4:30, one at 6. Cancel them. Tell the clients we're transitioning trainers and they'll be contacted about reassignment. How soon can you have his belongings ready for pickup? I can have everything packed within the hour. Do it. and make sure security knows he's no longer authorized to enter. Anthony left the office and positioned himself where he could see the main entrance. At 4:45, Ryan walked through the door in his standard uniform. Black polo shirt with the gym logo, athletic pants, training shoes. He headed straight for the staff area in the back. Anthony waited. 3 minutes later, Ryan emerged from the back room carrying a backpack, confusion clear on his face. He approached Cynthia at the front desk. "What's going on? My stuff was packed up and there's a note saying I'm terminated." "I'm sorry, Ryan. There's been an ownership change and the new owner made the decision." "Ownership change? What are you talking about?" "The gym was sold over the weekend." Ryan's face shifted through several expressions. Confusion, disbelief, dawning concern. "Sold to who?" "Me." Anthony stepped forward from where he'd been watching. Ryan turned, and the moment recognition hit, all color drained from his face. Every person in organized crime on the East Coast knew who Anthony Mancini was, what he looked like, what it meant when he took personal interest in something. "Mr. Mancini." Ryan's voice was carefully controlled, but Anthony could see panic in his eyes. "Ryan Blake." Anthony stopped 3 feet away, close enough to be threatening without actually making contact. "Your services are no longer required." "I don't understand. Did I do something?" "You know exactly what you did." Anthony's voice was quiet, deadly. "You took money from Viktor Sokolov, multiple times, in exchange for information about your clients." Ryan went rigid. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Thursday night, 9:47 p.m. alley behind this building. Gray Mercedes, envelope containing approximately $5,000. Want me to continue?" The last bit of color left Ryan's face. "That's what I thought." Anthony let the silence stretch. "You're going to take your things and leave. You're not going to contact any of your former clients. You're not going to attempt to enter this building again. And most importantly, you're going to stay away from Lauren Foster." "Lauren." Ryan's voice was barely audible. "Does she know that you've been using her to gather intelligence on me?" "No. And she won't find out unless you make me tell her." Ryan closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, something like resignation had settled there. "I need to explain. You need to leave. My sister is none of my concern. Whatever arrangement you have with the Bratva, that's your problem. But your access to my organization ends today." Ryan looked like he wanted to argue, to explain, to somehow make this different than what it was. But he was smart enough to know when he'd lost. He adjusted the backpack on his shoulder. "For what it's worth, I was helping Lauren. The training, the recovery program, that was all legitimate. That's the only reason you're walking out of here instead of being carried." Anthony's voice was ice. "Don't test my patience by trying to contact her." Ryan nodded once, turned, and walked out of the gym. Anthony watched until he disappeared down the street, then turned to Luca. "Have him followed. I want to know everywhere he goes, everyone he talks to. If he tries to reach Lauren, I want to know immediately." "Done." "What about the other clients he was gathering intel on?" "Not my problem. I've secured my asset. They can protect their own." Anthony pulled out his phone and sent a single text to Lauren. "Taking care of business. We'll be back late. Don't wait for me." Her response came immediately. "Understood. Be safe." 2 words that hit harder than they should have. Be safe. Like she cared whether he made it home. Anthony stared at the message for longer than necessary, before sliding the phone back into his pocket. Tomorrow, he would tell her about Patricia Simmons, about the new therapy setup in the building, about how Ryan wouldn't be training her anymore. Tomorrow, he would deal with her questions and confusion. But tonight, he'd eliminated a threat, cut off the Bratva's access point, protected someone who mattered more than she should. And if that meant owning a gym he had no use for, so be it. Wednesday morning arrived cold and sharp. Lauren woke at 5:30, the same time she'd been waking for the past 4 weeks. Her body had adjusted to the routine. Gym at 6:30, shower, office by 7:30. She dressed in her workout clothes, pulled her hair into a ponytail, grabbed the bright pink gym bag that had become a familiar comfort. The subway ride to Manhattan was quiet at this hour, mostly other early risers heading to jobs that demanded them before dawn. Lauren walked the 3 blocks from the station to Elevate Fitness, breath fogging in the November air. Her knee felt strong this morning, barely any stiffness. 4 months of work, and she was finally feeling like herself again. The gym came into view. Something was wrong. The lights were off. Not the dimmed overnight lighting, but completely dark. A paper notice was taped to the glass door. Lauren's stomach dropped. She walked closer, reading the printed text. Due to ownership transition, Elevate Fitness will be closed for reorganization November 19th, 20. We apologize for any inconvenience. Regular operations will resume November 24th. Ownership transition? Lauren pulled out her phone and dialed the emergency number listed at the bottom of the notice. It rang 4 times before someone answered. Elevate Fitness, this is Cynthia. Hi, this is Lauren Foster. I'm a member and I'm standing outside, but the gym is closed. What's going on? Oh, Lauren. Cynthia's voice was strange, carefully neutral. Yes, I'm sorry about the short notice. We had an unexpected ownership change over the weekend. The new owner is implementing some immediate changes. What kind of changes? A pause. Some staffing adjustments and facility updates. We should be reopened by Thursday. Staffing adjustments? Is Ryan working today? I have a session scheduled. Another pause. Longer this time. Ryan is no longer with Elevate Fitness. His employment was terminated yesterday. The words hit Lauren like cold water. What? Why? I'm not at liberty to discuss personnel decisions. But if you'd like to continue training, we'll be happy to match you with another trainer when we reopen. Lauren's hand tightened on her phone. Can I at least contact Ryan directly? Get his new gym information? I wouldn't recommend that. Cynthia's voice dropped slightly. The terms of his departure were complicated. Complicated how? I really can't say more. I'm sorry, Lauren. If you want to cancel your membership, we'll process a full refund. Lauren ended the call, standing alone on the empty sidewalk. Nothing made sense. Ryan had been fine on Monday morning, talking about her progress, planning next week's routine. Now he was fired under mysterious circumstances and she couldn't even contact him. She checked her watch. 6:45. Too late to go home and change, too early to show up at the office in workout clothes. Lauren found a coffee shop 2 blocks away and sat in the bathroom, changing into the work clothes she'd packed in her gym bag. Her hands shook slightly as she buttoned her blouse. Ryan had been helping her. Genuinely helping her. For 4 weeks, he'd been patient and encouraging, helping her rebuild strength she'd thought was lost forever. And now he was just gone, with no explanation, no warning. She felt the loss like a physical ache. By the time Lauren walked into the office, it was 8:15. She set her bag down at her desk, powered on her computer, tried to focus on her morning routine. But her chest felt tight. Her knee throbbed, phantom pain from stress rather than injury. She stared at her computer screen, seeing nothing. At 8:20, she stood abruptly and walked straight to Anthony's office. She didn't knock. Anthony looked up from his desk, surprise flickering across his face. In 18 months, Lauren had never entered his office without permission. Lauren, did you buy my gym? The question came out sharper than she intended. He set down the pen he'd been holding. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes confirmed what she already knew. Yes. The single word confirmation made her knees weak. And you fired Ryan? Yes. Lauren's hand found the back of the leather chair across from his desk, gripping it for balance. Why? Sit down. I don't want to sit. I want to know why you destroyed the one thing that was helping me recover from an injury I got because I work for you. Anthony stood slowly, moving around his desk. That's exactly why I did it. That makes no sense. Sit down, Lauren. His voice was gentle but firm. Please. She sat. Not because he asked, but because her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. Anthony returned to his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a folder. He placed it on the desk between them, then turned it to face her. The first page was a photograph. Ryan, standing in an alley, talking to a man in an expensive suit. Even in the grainy surveillance photo, Lauren recognized the location. Behind Elevate Fitness. Who is that? She asked. Viktor Sokolov. He works for Alexei Volkov, head of the Russian Bratva. They're my biggest rival. Lauren looked up sharply. What does that have to do with Ryan? Anthony flipped to the next page. Another photo. Ryan accepting an envelope. The next page showed a bank statement, certain deposits highlighted in yellow. Ryan has been receiving between $8,000 and $15,000 a month in cash deposits. The money comes from the Bratva. In exchange, he provides them with information. Information about what? About his clients. Specifically, clients who work for people in positions of power. Lauren's stomach turned. I don't understand. Anthony flipped through several more pages. Ryan has 17 regular clients. 4 of them are personal assistants or secretaries to major figures. 1 works for a Goldman Sachs executive, 1 for Senator Morrison, 1 for the district attorney's office, and 1 works for me. The implication crashed over her like a wave. You think he was using me? I don't think. I know. Anthony's voice was steady, factual. You have access to my schedule, my meetings, my movements. That information is extremely valuable to my enemies. Lauren's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs. Ryan was helping me. He was kind and patient, and he helped me walk again without pain. I'm sure he was good at his job. That's how this works. Build trust, establish rapport, extract information without the target realizing what's happening. Target. The word tasted bitter. I was a target. You were vulnerable. You needed help. He provided it, and in return, he asked questions. Casual questions that felt like friendly conversation. What time does your boss arrive? Does he keep regular appointments? Where does he go when he's not in the office? Every answer you gave him went straight to the Bratva. Lauren closed her eyes. She tried to remember conversations with Ryan. Had she mentioned Anthony's schedule? His meetings? Yes, she had. Multiple times. Ryan wanted to take me to coffee last week, she whispered, after a particularly good session. I said no because it felt inappropriate, but he seemed disappointed. Because you were careful. Some of his other clients weren't. Anthony pulled out another page. The Goldman Sachs executive was robbed 3 weeks ago, attacked in a parking garage at exactly the time his assistant told her trainer he'd be there alone. Lauren felt sick. You're telling me Ryan set that up? The Bratva did. Ryan just provided the intelligence. She looked down at the photos spread across the desk. At Ryan's face, frozen in surveillance images, accepting money from a man who looked like he killed people for a living. How had she not seen it? I trusted him. Her voice broke on the last word. That was the point. You were supposed to trust him. I feel so stupid. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. I should have known. Should have suspected. Why would you? He was doing exactly what you hired him to do, helping you recover. The intelligence gathering was invisible, but you saw it. She met Anthony's eyes. You figured it out. I followed you to the gym Thursday night. Lauren blinked. You followed me? Something flickered across his face. Discomfort. Maybe embarrassment. I saw Ryan take money from Victor in an alley behind the gym. After that, I had him investigated. You followed me to the gym. Lauren repeated it slowly, processing. Why? Anthony was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different. Less controlled, more raw. Because I didn't like how you smiled when you talked about him. The admission hung in the air between them. You were jealous. Lauren said it as fact, not question. I was concerned about security. You were jealous. She pressed harder. That's why you were watching the gym. Not because you suspected Ryan of anything. Because you didn't like that I was spending time with him. Anthony's jaw tightened. Both things can be true. Lauren sat back in her chair, mind reeling. Anthony Mancini, her boss, the man who controlled half of organized crime on the East Coast, had been jealous of her personal trainer. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now your recovery continues. I've already arranged for a replacement. Anthony pulled out a different folder. Patricia Simmons. 52 years old, 28 years of experience, specializes in post-surgical rehabilitation. Her background check is completely clean. No connections to any organization, no leverage anyone can use against her. You vetted my physical therapist. Extensively. She starts Wednesday. We're converting the second-floor conference room into a therapy space with professional equipment. You'll train there instead of an outside facility. You're bringing her here? To the building? Where my security can monitor access, yes. Lauren stared at him. You bought an entire gym, fired my trainer, hired a replacement, and redesigned office space. In 4 days. 3, actually. I didn't start until Friday morning. Anthony, she used his first name without thinking. This is insane. This is necessary. He leaned forward, intensity radiating from every line of his body. You were targeted because of me. Because working for me made you valuable to my enemies. I will not let that happen again. So you're just going to control every aspect of my life now? Decide who I train with, where I go, what I do? If that's what it takes to keep you safe, yes. I don't need a keeper. You need protection. There's a difference. Lauren wanted to argue, wanted to be angry about the high-handed way he'd dismantled her routine without consulting her. But sitting across from him, seeing the photos of Ryan's betrayal spread across the desk, she couldn't find the anger. He'd protected her, eliminated a threat she hadn't even known existed. Thank you. The words came out soft. Anthony's expression shifted. For what? For caring enough to follow me. For investigating Ryan. For making sure I'm safe. She met his eyes. I know you blame yourself for the accident. I know you think you owe me something because I got hurt while working for you. But you don't. I chose to work here. I knew the risks. You shouldn't have to accept being used as an intelligence asset as part of your job description. Maybe not. But you stopped it before any real damage was done. So thank you. Silence stretched between them. Anthony looked at her like he was trying to memorize her face. I need to tell you something else, he said finally. What? Buying the gym, firing Ryan, that was about security. But watching you with him, seeing how you smiled at him, how comfortable you were around him. He stopped, jaw working. That wasn't just security. That was jealousy. Pure, irrational jealousy that I had no right to feel. Lauren's breath caught. You're my secretary, Anthony continued. This is inappropriate in about 40 different ways. But I can't keep pretending that my only concern is professional. Not when I spent 4 days systematically removing another man from your life because I couldn't stand watching you trust him. Anthony, you don't have to respond. I'm not expecting anything from you, but you deserve honesty. And the honest truth is that protecting you isn't just about security anymore. It hasn't been for a while. Lauren sat frozen, trying to process what he'd just admitted. Anthony Mancini, who maintained rigid control over every aspect of his life, had just confessed to jealousy, to feelings that crossed every professional boundary. I don't know what to say, she whispered. You don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know. He stood, putting distance between them. Patricia will be here Monday at 8. I'll have Luca show you the new therapy space this afternoon so you know where to go. Professional again. Controlled again. Like the confession had never happened. But Lauren's heart was pounding, and her hands were still shaking, and everything she thought she understood about her relationship with Anthony Mancini had just been turned completely upside down. 3 weeks passed in a new rhythm. Lauren trained with Patricia Simmons every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday morning at 7 in the converted therapy space on the 2nd floor. The room had been transformed completely. Professional rehabilitation equipment lined one wall, padded mats covered the floor, mirrors reflected natural light from the large windows. Patricia was nothing like Ryan. She was methodical, clinical, focused entirely on biomechanics and recovery metrics. She didn't make small talk or ask personal questions. She assessed Lauren's progress with the detached efficiency of someone who'd spent 3 decades rebuilding broken bodies. And Lauren's recovery accelerated dramatically under her care. The limp disappeared completely. The persistent ache that had followed her through every day since the accident faded to nothing. By the end of the 2nd week, Patricia had her doing exercises that would have been impossible a month ago. Your muscle memory is excellent, Patricia observed during a Friday session, watching Lauren move through a complex squat variation. The foundation was always there. We just had to remind your nervous system how to access it. Lauren finished the set, breathing hard, but controlled. How much longer until I can try running? Another week. We'll start with light jogging on the treadmill, assess how the joint responds, then build from there. Patricia made notes on her tablet. But you're progressing ahead of schedule. Whatever work you did before the accident, your body hasn't forgotten it. What Lauren's body also hadn't forgotten was the awareness of being watched. Anthony observed every session. Not obviously, not intrusively. But Lauren could see him through the glass wall that separated the therapy room from the hallway. He'd walk past with a file in his hand, pause for 30 seconds to look at his phone, glance through the window. Or he'd be in conversation with Luca, standing in a position that gave him a clear view of the room. He was checking on her, making sure she was safe, that Patricia was legitimate, that no new threats had materialized. It should have felt suffocating. Instead, Lauren found it strangely comforting. The day after Anthony's confession in his office, things had been awkward. Lauren had spent the entire day hyper-aware of his presence, of every interaction, of the weight of what he'd admitted. But by the end of the week, they'd fallen into something new. Not the rigid professionalism of before, but not quite personal either. A strange middle ground where Anthony asked about her therapy progress, and Lauren occasionally stayed late to help him review documents, and neither of them acknowledged the shift that had happened between them. Then Luca walked into Anthony's office on a cold December morning with information that changed everything. Lauren was at her desk, reviewing the schedule for the following week, when she heard Anthony's voice through his open office door. "You're certain?" Confirmed through 3 separate sources. Luca's voice was grim. Melissa Blake disappeared 4 months ago, last seen August 14th walking home from her shift at a bookstore in Brooklyn. Security footage shows 2 men following her. They match known Bratva associates. Lauren's hand stilled on her keyboard. Melissa Blake, Ryan's sister. "Where is she now?" Anthony asked. "Warehouse complex near the Red Hook shipping terminal. We've had surveillance on the location for 2 days. She's being held in the main building, 2nd floor, room facing the water. How many guards? 6 rotating shifts, 2 men per shift. Standard Bratva security protocol for hostage situations. And Ryan? Still under surveillance. He hasn't attempted to contact Lauren or any of his former clients. He's holed up in New Jersey with his mother. Hasn't left the house in 3 weeks. Silence followed. Lauren knew she shouldn't be listening, but she couldn't make herself move. They took his sister to force his cooperation. Anthony said finally. He was never working for them by choice. Looks that way. Which means when you cut off his access to Lauren, you also cut off his ability to protect his sister. That's not my problem. Boss, if the Bratva realizes their intelligence stream has dried up, they might eliminate the sister. She's a liability now. More silence. Lauren held her breath. What was their endgame with Lauren? Anthony asked. From what we've pieced together, they were building a complete profile. Her routines, her vulnerabilities, her schedule. The plan was to grab her in about 2 weeks, use her as leverage to force concessions from you. Lauren's blood went cold. They were going to kidnap her. That was the working theory. Ryan had been feeding them information for 3 months. They had enough to make a move. Lauren stood slowly, walked to Anthony's door. Both men looked up when she appeared. How long have you known about this? Her voice was steadier than she felt. Anthony's expression didn't change. Luca just confirmed it. But you suspected. I suspected Ryan was gathering intelligence. I didn't know the Bratva's specific plan until now. Lauren stepped fully into the office. They were going to kidnap me. They were planning to, yes. But you were never in actual danger because I removed Ryan before they could act. She processed this, hands curling into fists at her sides. And his sister? She's being held because of information Ryan collected about me? She's being held because the Bratva uses family members as leverage. That's what they do. But he was gathering information because they had her, which means I'm connected to this whether I want to be or not. Anthony stood, came around his desk. Lauren, this isn't your responsibility. A 19-year-old girl is being held hostage because her brother tried to protect her by collecting information about me. How is that not my responsibility? Because the Bratva made that choice, not you. Ryan made that choice. You're a victim in this situation, not a participant. So, what happens to her? Lauren looked between Anthony and Luca. You just leave her there? That's not our problem to solve, Anthony said carefully. Yes, it is. Lauren's voice hardened. The only reason she's in danger is because of your world, your enemies, the fact that I work for you. If you can rescue her, you should. I don't involve myself in Bratva internal affairs unless they directly threaten my interests. They were planning to kidnap me. That sounds pretty direct to me. Anthony's jaw tightened. That threat is already neutralized. What about future threats? What about the next time they decide I'm useful leverage? Leaving their hostage situation unresolved doesn't make me safer. It just delays the problem. Luca cleared his throat. She's not wrong, boss. The Bratva knows we know about Ryan. They're going to retaliate somehow. We could frame this as a preemptive strike. Send a message that we don't tolerate civilian targets. Anthony looked at Lauren for a long moment. She met his gaze without flinching. You understand what you're asking me to do, he said quietly. I understand you're capable of getting her out safely, and I understand that 19-year-old girls shouldn't be used as weapons in your war. Something shifted in Anthony's expression. You're too good for this world. Maybe. But I'm in it anyway, so I might as well use whatever influence I have to do something right. Anthony turned to Luca. Start planning an extraction. I want options by end of day. Yes, sir. After Luca left, Lauren remained standing in the doorway. Anthony moved to the window, hands in his pockets, looking out at the city. You're accepting my security detail, he said, without turning around. Permanent driver, bodyguard when you're outside this building, electronic sweep of your apartment. I know, and you're not going to fight me on it. I understand why it's necessary now. Good. He turned to face her. Because the Bratva will notice when their warehouse gets hit. They'll figure out the connection, and they'll be angry. So, we make sure they're too busy dealing with their own problems to come after me. We? Lauren crossed her arms. I'm part of this now, Anthony. You made that clear when you bought a gym to protect me. So yes, we. He studied her face, searching for something. Most people would run, would quit, would distance themselves from this situation as fast as possible. I'm not most people. No. His voice dropped. You're not. The air between them felt charged, heavy with things neither of them was saying. I should get back to work, Lauren said finally. Lauren. He stopped her before she could leave. Thank you. For what? For caring about a girl you've never met. For making me remember that there are lines that shouldn't be crossed. Even in this life. She nodded once and returned to her desk. But she could feel his eyes on her back the entire time. That evening, Lauren stayed late again. Not because Anthony asked her to, but because she wanted to understand what was happening. Wanted to see the plans, know the risks, be part of the solution instead of just another problem he had to manage. At 10 p.m., they were alone in his office, maps of the Red Hook area spread across his desk. Luca had provided detailed layouts of the warehouse complex, guard rotation schedules, entry and exit points. The optimal approach is here. Anthony pointed to a service entrance on the east side. 2-man entry team suppressed weapons, neutralize guards quietly. Second team secures the perimeter, blocks reinforcements. We're in and out in under 10 minutes. Lauren leaned over the map, studying the layout. What about cameras? Luca's team will loop the feeds. As far as their security system is concerned, nothing will happen. And the girl, Melissa? How do you know she'll cooperate? She's been held for 4 months. She might not trust anyone. That's why we're bringing Ryan. Lauren's head snapped up. What? Ryan knows his sister. She'll trust him. We extract both of them together, relocate them somewhere safe. You'd do that? After everything he did? Anthony straightened, meeting her eyes. He was protecting family. I understand that motivation. And you're right. This situation exists because of my world. The least I can do is end it properly. They stood close together. The map between them. City lights painting shadows across Anthony's face. Lauren could smell his cologne, woodsy and clean. Could see the faint stubble on his jaw where he'd skipped his usual evening shave. Her hand rested on the desk near his. Not touching, but close. The accident, Anthony said suddenly. 6 months ago. It haunts me. Lauren went still. Anthony, every time I see you limp, every time you wince because your knee aches, every time I remember that you were in that taxi because of paperwork I needed filed, because you work for me, Because being near me makes you a target." His voice was rough. "It's a weight I carry every single day. I never blamed you. You should. You should have quit. Should have taken the settlement money and walked away from this life. From me. From all of it. But I didn't." She turned to face him fully. "I chose to stay. Not because I felt obligated. Not because I was afraid to leave. But because I trust you. Because working for you. Being part of this world. It makes me feel like I'm contributing to something that matters. Lauren, I run a criminal organization. Nothing about this matters in any legitimate sense. You protect people. You maintain order. You have rules, boundaries, things you won't compromise on. That matters to me." They were inches apart now, neither of them sure how the distance had closed. "You're too good for me," Anthony said quietly. "Stop telling me what I am. I know who I am. I know what I want. And what do you want?" The question hung between them, dangerous and necessary. Lauren's hand moved, just slightly, until her fingers touched his where they rested on the edge of the desk. The contact was electric. "I want to stop pretending this is just professional." Anthony's breath caught. His hand turned, palm up, fingers lacing with hers. "This is a terrible idea. Probably. You work for me. There are 100 reasons why this crosses every line. I know. And you're under pressure. The threat, the security concerns, everything happening around you. I won't take advantage of that." Lauren stepped closer, free hand coming up to rest against his chest. "You're not taking advantage. I'm choosing this, fully aware, completely conscious of every complication." Anthony's other hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. "Once we cross this line, there's no going back. Everything changes. Everything already changed. We're just finally admitting it." He leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met softly at first, testing, questioning. Then Anthony's control cracked, and he pulled her closer, kissing her with the intensity of months of suppressed want. Lauren melted into him, hands fisting in his shirt, letting herself finally feel everything she'd been pushing down since he'd confessed to jealousy 3 weeks ago. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Anthony rested his forehead against hers. "This complicates everything," he whispered. "I know. I can't promise you safety. Can't promise normalcy. My world is dangerous and dark and full of threats. I'm not asking for promises. I'm asking for honesty. For this. Whatever this becomes." He kissed her again, softer this time. "You have it. All of it." They stood together in his office, the map forgotten, the rescue operation temporarily pushed aside, letting themselves finally acknowledge what had been building between them for months. Outside, the city glittered with lights, oblivious to the shift happening 40 stories above its streets. Inside, Lauren Foster and Anthony Mancini crossed a line they'd both been carefully avoiding, and neither of them regretted it. 3 days after the maps had been spread across Anthony's desk, the rescue operation launched at 2 a.m. Lauren wasn't part of it. Anthony had made that explicitly clear. "You stay at the penthouse," he'd said that afternoon, voice leaving no room for argument. 4 guards remain with you. You monitor communications on the secure channel, but you do not leave that building under any circumstances." Lauren had wanted to protest, wanted to insist she could be useful somehow. But one look at Anthony's face told her this wasn't negotiable. So now she sat on the leather sofa in Anthony's penthouse, 43 floors above Manhattan, wearing one of his old sweatshirts because the apartment felt too cold and empty without him in it. A radio sat on the coffee table in front of her, connected to the secure frequency his team used. Static crackled. Voices came through intermittently, clipped and professional. Team 1 in position. Team 2 ready at the perimeter. Target building confirmed. 6 heat signatures on 2nd floor. Lauren pulled the sweatshirt sleeves over her hands, knees drawn up to her chest. 4 of Anthony's guards were positioned throughout the penthouse. 1 at the elevator, 1 in the hallway, 2 rotating between rooms. She was as safe as it was possible to be. But Anthony was walking into a building full of armed men who wouldn't hesitate to kill him. The radio crackled again. Initiating entry in 30 seconds. Lauren's heart hammered against her ribs. She checked her phone. 2:37 a.m. Entry successful. Moving to secondary. Silence followed. Long, terrible silence where Lauren counted her own heartbeats and tried not to imagine everything that could go wrong. Then, package located. Female, conscious, responsive, proceeding with extraction. Relief flooded through her. Melissa was alive. Contact. East stairwell. Engaging. The sharp crack of gunfire came through the radio, distant but unmistakable. Lauren's hands clenched into fists. More voices, overlapping, urgent. Reinforcements incoming. 3 vehicles, estimate 12 hostiles. Team 2, intercept and delay. Roger that. Boss is hit. Left shoulder. Still mobile. Lauren stopped breathing. Boss is hit. Anthony had been shot. She wanted to scream into the radio, demand status updates, know how bad the wound was, but she forced herself to stay silent. Distracting them now could get someone killed. Exiting building, package secure. Boss is ambulatory, wound appears superficial. All units fall back to rally point. Team 2 reporting 3 hostiles down, remainder retreating. Clean exit, moving to secondary location. The transmissions continued for another 10 minutes as the team extracted from Red Hook, switched vehicles, took evasive routes to ensure they weren't followed. Standard protocol that Lauren had learned about through months of working adjacent to Anthony's world. Finally, all clear. Returning to base. ETA 4 hours. 4 hours. It was 3 a.m. now. Anthony wouldn't be back until 7. Lauren stood, paced the length of the penthouse living room. The space was enormous, all dark wood and leather furniture and windows that showcased the glittering city below. She'd been here twice before, both times briefly, always maintaining professional distance. Tonight she'd moved in temporarily. Her overnight bag sat in the guest bedroom, clothes hung in the closet, toothbrush in the bathroom. Temporary security measures while the Bratva threat was active. But standing here in Anthony's sweatshirt, waiting for him to come home from a gunfight, nothing felt temporary. She tried to sleep, made it to the guest bedroom, lay on top of the covers fully clothed, closed her eyes. 10 minutes later, she was back in the living room, staring at the radio, willing it to provide updates it couldn't give. At 3:45, one of the guards brought her tea. He's going to be fine, Miss Foster. Boss has been through worse. Lauren wrapped her hands around the warm mug. How many times has he been shot? That I know about? 4. Always comes back. The answer didn't comfort her the way it was probably meant to. At 4:15, the elevator chimed. Lauren was on her feet instantly. The guard at the elevator stepped aside as the doors opened. Anthony walked out first, followed by Luca and 2 other men Lauren didn't recognize. His white shirt was dark with blood on the left side, soaked through from shoulder to mid-torso. His jacket was gone. His face was pale but composed. Lauren's vision tunneled. All she could see was the blood. You're bleeding. Her voice came out hoarse. Flesh wound. Already been treated. Anthony moved toward her, steady on his feet. Melissa is safe. She's at a private medical facility under protective custody. Ryan is with her. You're bleeding, Lauren repeated, because she couldn't process anything else he was saying. Lauren. He stopped in front of her. I'm fine. There's blood soaked through your entire shirt. That's not fine. Luca cleared his throat. Boss, you should let her look at it. The field dressing was quick, not thorough. Anthony's jaw tightened. I said it's handled, and I'm saying I need to see it. Lauren set down her tea, hands shaking. Please. Something in her voice made him relent. Everyone out. Give us the room. The guards and Luca filed back into the elevator. The doors closed, leaving them alone. Sit, Lauren ordered, pointing to the sofa. Lauren, sit down, Anthony. Now. He sat, probably more from surprise at her tone than actual compliance. Lauren moved in front of him, reaching for the buttons on his blood-soaked shirt. Her fingers trembled so badly she could barely manage the first button. Anthony's hand came up to cover hers. I'm okay. I promise you I'm okay. Let me see. He dropped his hand, allowing her to continue. She unbuttoned the shirt carefully, peeling the fabric away from his skin. Blood had soaked through to his undershirt too. She helped him ease the dress shirt off, wincing when he hissed in pain, moving his left arm. The undershirt came next. When she finally got it over his head, she saw the wound. A bullet had torn through the muscle of his left shoulder, entry and exit wounds both visible. Someone had packed both holes with gauze and wrapped the entire shoulder with medical tape, but blood was already seeping through the white bandaging. "It's not as bad as it looks," Anthony said quietly. Lauren's vision blurred. "You could have died, but I didn't." "You could have." Her voice broke. "You could have been killed, and I would have been sitting here listening to it happen over the radio." "Hey." Anthony's right hand came up to cup her face. "I'm here. I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're shot." Tears spilled over despite her best efforts to contain them. "Where's the medical kit?" "Bathroom, under the sink." Lauren found the kit, brought it back to the living room. Professional-grade supplies, the kind that suggested this wasn't the first time Anthony had needed emergency medical care at home. She knelt on the sofa beside him, carefully removing the field dressing. The entry wound was clean, small caliber round. The exit wound was messier, but not as bad as it could have been. "You're lucky," she said, voice unsteady. "A few inches to the right and this would have hit your lung." "I know." She cleaned both wounds with antiseptic, trying to keep her hands steady. Anthony didn't flinch, didn't make a sound, just watched her face while she worked. "What were you thinking about?" Lauren asked quietly. "During the firefight. When you were shot." "You." Her hands stilled. "What?" "I was thinking about you. About how I'd promised to come back. And I couldn't break that promise." His dark eyes held hers. "Every decision I made in that building. Every move. I was thinking about getting back here. To you." Lauren's chest ached. "Anthony, I love you." He said it simply, like it was the most obvious truth in the world. "I've been in love with you for months. Maybe since you came back from the accident and refused to blame me for it. Maybe since before that. But tonight, taking fire in that warehouse, all I could think was that I needed to survive because you were waiting for me." The bandage fell from Lauren's fingers. "You love me." "Yes. You could have died before I ever knew that. But I didn't die. I'm here." She kissed him then, hard and desperate, tasting salt from her own tears. Anthony's good arm came around her waist, pulling her closer, despite the pain it must have caused. When they broke apart, Lauren pressed her forehead to his. "I'm in love with you too. I've been trying not to be, trying to stay professional, trying to convince myself it was just proximity or gratitude or anything other than what it actually is. But I can't anymore. I'm in love with you. And watching you walk out of that elevator covered in blood was the worst moment of my life." Anthony's hand tangled in her hair. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Just don't die. Promise me you won't die." "I can't promise that. This life doesn't come with guarantees." "And promise me you'll try. Promise me you'll fight to come home. That I can promise." He kissed her again, softer this time. "Always." Lauren finished bandaging his shoulder with trembling hands, then helped him into a clean shirt. The sky outside was starting to lighten, dawn approaching over the city. "You need rest," she said. "So do you." They moved to Anthony's bedroom together, neither willing to be separated. Lauren helped him lie down, mindful of his injured shoulder. Then she curled against his right side, head resting on his chest, where she could hear his heartbeat. Alive. He was alive. "Tell me about Melissa," she whispered, scared but unharmed. "Ryan's with her at the hospital. They're both under guard until we figure out what to do with them. And the Bratva? We'll retaliate eventually, but we sent a message tonight. Civilian hostages are off limits." Lauren traced idle patterns on his chest. "What happens now?" "Now, you stay here until the immediate threat passes. Now we strengthen security protocols. Now I tell everyone in my organization that you're mine, and touching you means death. Possessive much?" "Completely." His arm tightened around her. "You're the most important thing in my life, Lauren. I'm not taking chances with your safety." "What about your safety?" "I've been doing this for 15 years. I know how to stay alive. You got shot tonight, and I'm still here, still holding you." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Sleep. We'll figure everything else out later." Lauren wanted to stay awake, wanted to memorize this moment, the feeling of his heartbeat steady beneath her ear, but exhaustion pulled at her. the adrenaline crash finally hitting. She drifted off, wrapped in Anthony's arms. The man she'd tried so hard not to fall in love with, holding her like she was something precious, something worth fighting for, worth surviving for. When she woke hours later, sunlight was streaming through the windows. Anthony was still asleep beside her, breathing deep, and even despite the injury. Lauren carefully extracted herself, went to the kitchen, started coffee. Her phone showed 11 missed messages from Sarah, her best friend, wondering where she'd disappeared to. She'd have to explain eventually. Have to tell Sarah that she'd fallen in love with her boss, that her life had become something out of a thriller novel, that she was choosing this dangerous, complicated path anyway. But for now, she just returned to the bedroom and watched Anthony sleep, grateful he'd made it home, grateful for this chance they'd finally taken, grateful that whatever came next, they'd face it together. 2 days later, Lauren sat on the edge of the bed while Anthony slept behind her, his arm thrown protectively over the space she'd left. Her phone felt heavier than it should have. She stepped into the bathroom, closed the door, and called Sarah. The answer came on the first ring. "Lauren?" Sarah's voice cracked with equal parts anger and relief. "Where the hell have you been? I've been calling you for days. I'm here." Lauren whispered, throat tight. "I'm safe. I'm sorry. Something happened and I couldn't explain over the phone. I still can't. Not yet. But I'm alive." A shaky silence. Then Sarah exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for days. "Are you hurt?" "No, not me." Lauren swallowed. "I just needed you to know I didn't disappear because I stopped caring." "You sound scared," Sarah said softly. "I am," Lauren admitted. "But I'm not alone. I'll tell you everything when I can. Soon, I promise." Another pause, then Sarah's voice steadied. "But you meet me, okay? In person. Somewhere public. As soon as you can." "I will. I'll text you a time and place. And if I go quiet for a while, it doesn't mean I'm gone." "I hate this," Sarah murmured. Love threaded through the words. "But I'm here. Call me the second you can." Lauren closed her eyes, letting the relief settle into her bones. "Thank you." When she ended the call, her hands were shaking, but the weight in her chest eased, just enough to breathe. 5 days after Melissa Blake was pulled from the Bratva warehouse, Ryan was brought to Anthony's office under armed escort. He looked like he hadn't slept since the rescue. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His clothes were rumpled, and his hands shook slightly when Luca guided him into the chair across from Anthony's desk. Ryan expected to die. Lauren could see it in every line of his body, the way he held himself rigid, prepared for violence. She'd chosen to be there for this conversation. Anthony had offered her the option to stay away, to distance herself from whatever was about to happen. But Lauren needed to hear the truth directly from Ryan, needed to understand why. Anthony sat behind his desk, expression unreadable. Lauren stood by the window, arms crossed, watching. "Your sister is safe," Anthony said without preamble. "She's recovering at a private medical facility. No permanent physical injuries, though the psychological trauma will take time to heal." Ryan's composure shattered instantly. His head dropped into his hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "Thank you. God, thank you. You're welcome." Anthony's voice was neutral. "Now tell me why I shouldn't kill you anyway." Ryan looked up, tears streaming down his face. "I never wanted to betray anyone, especially not Lauren. She was kind to me, trusted me, but they had Melissa." "Explain." The story came out in broken pieces. Melissa had been walking home from her shift at a Brooklyn bookstore 4 months ago. 2 men grabbed her off the street, threw her in a van. Ryan received a video 3 hours later showing his sister bound and terrified, a gun pressed to her head. The message was simple: cooperate or watch her die. "They wanted information about my clients," Ryan said, voice hoarse. "Schedules, routines, vulnerabilities. Anyone who worked for someone important. I tried to refuse. Told them I couldn't do that to innocent people. They sent me another video." He pulled out his phone with shaking hands, navigated to a folder, turned the screen toward Anthony. The video showed Melissa being beaten, crying, begging her brother to do whatever they asked. Lauren's stomach turned. So I cooperated. Ryan's voice broke again. I collected information, passed it along, told myself I was protecting my sister, that I'd find a way to get her out eventually. But every day that passed, every client I betrayed, it got worse. When Lauren started training with me, I knew exactly who she worked for, knew she'd be valuable to them. And I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop. Every time I thought about refusing, they'd send another video of Melissa. He showed them more evidence. Text messages from Bratva handlers giving him specific questions to ask. Photos of Melissa in different locations within the warehouse. Proof of life to keep him compliant. A meticulous record of 4 months of coercion and terror. I never wanted to hurt Lauren, Ryan said, looking directly at her for the first time. Everything I did to help you recover, that was real. The training program, the encouragement, watching you get stronger. That was the only good thing in my life during those months. And I destroyed it by using you anyway. Lauren uncrossed her arms. She should be angry. Should hate him for the betrayal. For making her a target. For putting her in danger. But looking at his destroyed face, understanding what he'd endured, she couldn't find the rage. Your sister is 19 years old, she said quietly. Of course you did what they asked. Anyone would have. That doesn't make it right. No. But it makes it understandable. Lauren moved closer to the desk. You were protecting family. That's not evil, Ryan. That's human. Anthony watched this exchange with careful attention. Then he leaned forward, elbows on his desk. I'm going to offer you 2 choices, he said. 1. You and Melissa disappear. New identities, relocation to somewhere far from New York, enough money to start over. You walk away from this life and never look back. Ryan nodded slowly. And the second choice? You work for me. You've spent 4 months embedded with the Bratva's intelligence operation. You know their structure, their methods, their contacts. That information is valuable. Use it to help me dismantle their operation, and I'll protect both you and your sister. Permanent employment, legitimate security work, a chance to make this right. You'd trust me? Ryan's voice was incredulous. After everything I did, I'd trust your motivation. You protected family. I understand that loyalty. What I need to know is whether you can redirect it. Ryan looked at Lauren. Would you be okay with that? Me working here? I'm not the one making this decision, Lauren said. But for what it's worth, I believe people deserve second chances when they earn them. You were trying to save your sister. That counts for something. Then I want the second choice. Ryan straightened in his chair. I want to work for you. I want to help take down the people who did this to Melissa, to me, to everyone they've hurt. And I want to prove that I'm more than what they forced me to become. Anthony studied him for a long moment. If you betray me again, you won't get a third chance. I understand. Good. Report to Luca tomorrow morning. He'll start your debriefing. After Ryan left with his escort, Lauren moved to stand beside Anthony's desk. That was generous. That was strategic. He knows things that will help us neutralize a major threat. You could have just extracted that information through other means. Anthony looked up at her. You wanted me to give him a chance. I'm giving him one. Because of me? Because you saw something worth saving. And I trust your judgment. Lauren leaned down and kissed him, soft and quick. Thank you. Over the next 2 weeks, Ryan's debriefing revealed critical intelligence. The Bratva's operation was larger than Anthony had suspected, with networks extending through multiple cities. But the most valuable information was about internal dynamics. Viktor Sokolov was unhappy. Alexei Volkov, the Bratva's leader, had become increasingly paranoid and reckless over the past year. His decisions were putting the entire organization at risk, creating unnecessary conflicts, drawing unwanted attention from law enforcement. Viktor wanted out. But leaving the Bratva wasn't something you did voluntarily. People who tried to walk away ended up dead. Anthony saw an opportunity. He arranged a meeting through careful intermediaries, a neutral location, security for both sides, terms that would allow Viktor to speak freely without immediate repercussions. They met in an empty warehouse in Queens at midnight. Viktor arrived with 2 bodyguards. Anthony brought Luca and 1 other man. You're taking a substantial risk being here. Anthony said. Victor smiled coldly. So are you. Volkov would have me killed if he knew about this meeting, and he'd consider it an act of war from you, which is why we're both motivated to make this conversation worthwhile. What do you want, Victor? Out. Clean exit, new identity, safe passage to South America. I have resources there, people who owe me favors. But I need to disappear completely. In exchange for? Everything. Volkov's location, his schedule, his security protocols, command structure of the entire organization, operation routes, money laundering channels, every piece of information you'd need to dismantle what he's built. Anthony considered this. Why turn on your own organization? Because it's not mine anymore. Volkov is driving us into the ground. 3 operations failed in the past month because of his paranoia. He's making enemies unnecessarily, refusing to compromise, treating loyal soldiers like disposable assets. The organization I joined doesn't exist anymore. And the girl, Melissa Blake? Victor's expression flickered. I was against that. Holding civilians, especially teenagers, it's beneath us. But Volkov insisted. Said we needed maximum leverage to secure quality intelligence. He paused. I'm glad you got her out. You're the one who freed her. I gave the location to your people, yes. Consider it a gesture of good faith before this meeting. Anthony pulled out his phone, typed a quick message to his contacts. I'll need to verify your information before I agree to anything. Verify what you need, but do it quickly. Volkov already suspects something is wrong after the warehouse raid. If he figures out I'm involved, we both lose this opportunity. 3 days of verification confirmed that Victor's intelligence was accurate. Locations, schedules, organizational charts, all of it matched what Anthony's people could independently confirm. The operation happened on a Friday night. 5 locations hit simultaneously. Anthony coordinated with 2 other Italian families who had their own grievances with Volkov. Warehouses, front businesses, safe houses, all targeted at exactly 9 p.m. The Bratva's command structure collapsed in under 2 hours. Volkov himself was at his favorite restaurant in Brighton Beach when Anthony walked through the door with 6 armed men. The other diners evacuated quickly. The owner, who'd been paying protection money to both organizations for years, simply nodded and disappeared into his office. Alexei Volkov sat at a corner table, a meal half finished in front of him. He was in his mid-50s, gray hair, expensive suit. The look of a man who'd spent decades clawing his way to power. Anthony Mancini. Volkov didn't stand. I wondered when you'd make your move. Your operation is finished. Every major asset seized or destroyed. Your lieutenants are either dead or in custody. It's over, Alexei. So you're here to kill me. Volkov reached for his wineglass with steady hands. Make it quick, at least. I'm here to offer you a choice. Anthony pulled out a chair, sat across from him. Go back to Russia, tonight. Abandon all operations in America. Never return. Do that, and you live. Volkov's eyes narrowed. You're letting me go? I'm removing a rival without starting a war that would cost both our organizations. Your bosses in Moscow won't be happy, but they'll accept your return if you frame it as strategic retreat. You get to live. I get permanent elimination of a threat. Everyone wins. And if I refuse, then you die here, in this restaurant. And the story becomes that you were killed by your own people during internal power struggles. Either way, you're out of my city. You choose how. Silence stretched between them. Volkov took a long sip of his wine, considering options that weren't really options at all. 2 days, he said finally. I need 2 days to arrange travel and settle affairs. You have 48 hours. After that, the offer expires. Volkov left New York 36 hours later, flying out of JFK under a false passport that Anthony's people had flagged but allowed through. The Bratva's American operations fell apart without him, absorbed by other organizations or dismantled entirely. Victor disappeared to Sao Paulo with a new identity and enough money to live comfortably. Ryan Blake became a fixture in Anthony's security team, working under Luca, proving his loyalty through consistent, dedicated service. Melissa started classes at Columbia in January, her tuition paid through a scholarship fund that Anthony had established. She met with a therapist twice a week to process her trauma, slowly rebuilding the life that had been stolen from her. And Lauren Foster stopped being Anthony Mancini's secretary. 2 months after the Bratva fell, Anthony restructured her role. She became his strategic advisor, sitting in on high-level meetings, offering perspectives that his captains couldn't provide, helping him navigate the increasingly complex landscape of his organization. Their relationship was public within the organization now. Everyone knew that Lauren was more than an employee, that she occupied a space in Anthony's life that made her both protected and influential. Some of the older captains had raised eyebrows initially, but after watching her handle sensitive negotiations and contribute meaningfully to operational planning, the skepticism faded. Lauren earned her position through competence, not just her connection to Anthony. The gym that Anthony had purchased was converted into something better. A community rehabilitation center offering free physical therapy to anyone who needed it, regardless of ability to pay. Patricia Simmons became the director, building a staff of qualified therapists and creating programs that helped dozens of people every week. Lauren managed the center as a side project, finding deep satisfaction in turning something born from jealousy and threat into genuine help for her community. On a cold February evening, Lauren stood on the terrace of Anthony's penthouse, looking out at the city lights. She wore a burgundy dress that she'd bought specifically for tonight, hair loose around her shoulders, finally comfortable in her own skin. Anthony came up behind her, arms wrapping around her waist, chin resting on her shoulder. "You're thinking too hard," he murmured against her ear. "I'm thinking about how different everything is from 6 months ago." "Better or worse? Terrifying and perfect." She turned in his arms. "I never imagined my life would look like this." "Regrets?" "Not even one." Anthony reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Lauren's breath caught. "This isn't a proposal," he said quickly. "Not yet. But it's a promise. A commitment to a future where we figure this out together, where you're not just part of my life, but the center of it." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, elegant and simple, a single diamond on a platinum band. "Lauren Foster, will you continue choosing this complicated, dangerous, completely imperfect life with me?" Tears pricked her eyes. "That's the easiest question anyone has ever asked me." "Yes. Always yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, then kissed her with the kind of intensity that still made her knees weak after months together. When they broke apart, Lauren laughed softly. "You know, this all started because you were jealous of my personal trainer. Best jealousy I ever experienced. You bought an entire gym, worth every dollar. They stood together on the terrace, the city spreading below them like a sea of lights. Two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built something real from the chaos. Lauren had come to New York to work. She'd found family, purpose, love, and a future she never could have imagined. And laying in Anthony's arms, wearing his ring, she knew with absolute certainty that every dangerous, complicated, terrifying choice that had led her here had been exactly right.